The pregnancy test had been in Rowan Keats's coat pocket for 3 hours, and somehow it already felt heavier than everything else he owned. At 29, Rowan had become good at carrying things quietly. Impossible client deadlines, rent increases, the occasional ache of being an Omega who had spent most of his adult life assuming permanence happened to other people. But this was different. This was a future. His doctor had confirmed it that morning, and Rowan had walked 6 blocks afterward with one hand pressed protectively over his stomach, smiling at strangers like an idiot. Now a tiny pair of cream-colored baby socks waited inside a gift box on the kitchen table beside Gideon's favorite takeout, and a card Rowan had rewritten 4 times. He could already imagine Gideon opening it. The stunned silence. The rare smile that softened the alpha's entire face. Maybe even those 3 words Rowan had secretly wanted for months. Let's be a family. And that was exactly why Rowan was terrified. Gideon Rourke could negotiate contracts worth millions without blinking. But lately he'd been disappearing overnight for client emergencies, coming home exhausted with apologies instead of explanations. Rowan had told himself not to invent problems. Tonight, he thought, would tell him whether the future he'd been drawing in his head had room for all 3 of them. The doorbell rang. Rowan checked the time. Gideon wasn't supposed to be home for another 20 minutes. "Please don't be another package for 4B, he muttered, crossing the apartment. He opened the door with half a smile still on his face. A little boy stood in the hallway, maybe 6. Pale skin, dark hair badly flattened on one side, navy backpack hanging from one shoulder. He wasn't crying. Somehow that made Rowan more nervous. "Hey, buddy, are you lost?" The boy looked past him into the apartment. His small forehead creased. "Does Papa live here?" Rowan crouched so they were closer to eye level. "What's your papa's name?" Instead of answering, the boy dug into his backpack and pulled out a photograph with bent corners. He said this was his old apartment building. I wanted to surprise him. Rowan almost smiled at the coincidence. Then the boy turned the photograph around. The world became very quiet. Gideon was in the picture. Not Gideon at a corporate event. Not Gideon accidentally caught in somebody else's family photo. Gideon was kneeling on green grass in shirt sleeves, laughing as he held this same boy against his chest. Rowan knew that laugh. He'd spent 2 years learning how difficult it was to earn. On the back, in a child's uneven handwriting, were 4 words, "Me and Papa Gideon." Rowan stared too long. The boy shifted. "Do you know him?" "Yeah." Rowan barely recognized his own voice. "I know him." The boy brightened, then glanced into the apartment again. His eyes landed on Gideon's charcoal coat hanging beside Rowan's jacket. Recognition crossed his face. "That's Papa's." Rowan stood slowly. His heart had started beating hard enough to make him lightheaded. "What's your name?" "Milo." "Okay, Milo. Is there an adult here with you?" Milo pointed toward the elevators. "Aunt June brought me. I came ahead because I know the number." Rowan exhaled. Good. At least the child was safe. That should have been the important thing. Instead, Rowan's eyes drifted toward the kitchen table. The little gift box sat under warm pendant lights, ridiculous in its neat silver ribbon. 30 minutes ago, it had represented the happiest secret Rowan had ever kept. Now he wanted to hide it. Milo followed his gaze. "Is it your birthday?" "No." Rowan crossed the room and quietly moved the box into a drawer. His fingers trembled as he closed it. When he turned around, Milo was studying him with the blunt concern only children seemed brave enough to show. "Are you sick?" Rowan almost laughed. "Just having a weird day." Milo considered that, then held out the photograph again. "You can look if you want." Rowan took it. There were details he'd missed. Gideon's watch. Gideon's hand around Milo's waist. A tiny dinosaur sticker stuck crookedly to Gideon's shirt. This wasn't one accidental afternoon. This was familiarity. Home. Rowan thought of every late meeting, every weekend conference, every midnight message saying don't wait up. 2 years rearranged themselves inside his head. Then Milo asked. The question Rowan would remember long after everything else about that evening blurred. "Why are you living with my papa?" Rowan's throat closed. Before he could answer, footsteps sounded behind Milo. Fast. Controlled. Familiar. Gideon appeared around the corner carrying a paper grocery bag and the white lilies he bought whenever Rowan had survived a brutal deadline. For 1 second, Gideon looked at Rowan and smiled. Then he saw Milo. The bag slipped against his arm. Gideon caught it automatically, but the flowers fell to the carpet. "Milo." The boy's entire face lit up. Papa! He ran. Gideon dropped to one knee without hesitation and caught him, one arm wrapping around the child's back, while the other checked his face and shoulders. What are you doing here? Are you okay? Where's June? There was no confusion in Gideon's voice. No question about who this child was. Only fear, recognition, love. Rowan had been waiting 2 years to see what Gideon looked like when his carefully controlled world cracked open. He had never imagined he'd be standing on the other side of it. Gideon looked up. Their eyes met across the hallway. Rowan, just his name, but something in Gideon's expression changed from panic to dread. Rowan held up the photograph. Is he your son? Gideon's hand remained on Milo's shoulder. Silence stretched between them. Then Gideon did the one thing Rowan hadn't prepared himself for. He didn't lie. Yes. The word landed softly and destroyed everything loudly. Rowan thought about the hidden pregnancy test, the baby socks, the future he'd been afraid Gideon might not want. Apparently Gideon already knew how to be a father. He had simply never thought Rowan deserved to know. Gideon rose, but he didn't come closer. For once, the alpha who always seemed to know exactly what to do looked completely lost. I can explain. Rowan looked at Milo, then at the man he'd loved enough to build a future around, and felt something inside him shift. The fear he'd carried all afternoon disappeared. Not because things were better, because the thing he'd been afraid of had already happened. There was nothing left to protect except himself and the child Gideon didn't. Yet no existed. Rowan stepped aside and opened the apartment door wider. Then come inside, he said quietly. And this time, Gideon, tell me the whole truth. Rowan closed the apartment door, and suddenly the place felt too small for all the truths that had been kept out of it. Milo stayed close to Gideon, one hand curled around the sleeve of his expensive charcoal coat, while Gideon stood beneath the warm kitchen lights looking nothing like the man whose photograph appeared in business magazines whenever Rourke Design Group landed another 8-figure project. That Gideon could silence a conference room with one look. This one was kneeling to retie a 6-year-old boy's loose sneaker. You cannot run ahead like that, Gideon said quietly. June was probably terrified. Milo lowered his head. I wanted to surprise you. Gideon's expression softened immediately. I know. I am glad you wanted to see me. I am not glad you disappeared from the adult responsible for you. Those are two different things. Rowan hated that he noticed how gentle Gideon's voice became with the boy. He hated even more that it made something ache inside him. Gideon knew how to do this. He knew how to be patient. He knew how to be a father. Rowan had spent the afternoon wondering whether pregnancy would scare him away, while Gideon had apparently been packing school lunches somewhere else. A knock came at the door. Gideon opened it to a breathless older relative who immediately apologized for losing sight of Milo near the elevator. Gideon did not raise his voice or humiliate her. He simply checked that Milo had his backpack, kissed the top of his head, and promised he would call later. Milo looked back at Rowan before leaving. Sorry I made your day weird. Despite everything, Rowan almost smiled. You did not do anything wrong, Milo. Gideon's eyes lifted sharply at that. Rowan meant every word. Whatever happened next belonged to the adults. The door closed again. Silence returned. Gideon's phone began vibrating almost immediately. He glanced at the screen. Take it, Rowan said. Apparently you have a lot of lives to manage. Gideon flinched, then answered. His voice changed instantly. Calm, precise, powerful. Move tomorrow's client presentation to 11. Tell the board I will not attend tonight's dinner. No, do not reschedule it around me. Proceed without me. A pause. Because I said so. He ended the call and turned the phone completely off. Rowan stared. Gideon never turned that phone off. Once, during their anniversary dinner, he had taken 3 calls between appetizers and dessert because a developer in Chicago was threatening to walk away from a project. Do not perform for me, Rowan said. I am not. Gideon placed the phone on the counter. For 2 years, I made you compete with emergencies you did not understand. You get my full attention now. It was exactly the kind of thing Rowan had once wanted to hear. Tonight it only made him tired. Is Milo your son? Yes. Biologically? Yes. How old? 6. So he existed before we met? Yes. Rowan folded his arms tightly. And in 2 years, you somehow never found a sentence long enough to mention him. Gideon looked down. That frightened Rowan more than defensiveness would have. Gideon Rourke always had an answer. No, Gideon said. There is no version of this where I can make that sound acceptable. Rowan had prepared himself for excuses. The absence of one left him strangely off balance. Where does he live? At a townhouse I own about 20 minutes from here. He stays there during my parenting time. My sister helps when work takes me away. Rowan felt cold. The townhouse. Gideon nodded once. Rowan remembered canceled dinners. Weekend site visits. Nights when Gideon had texted that a meeting ran late. How many times did you tell me you were working when you were actually with him? Gideon's jaw tightened. Enough that I owe you a complete timeline instead of asking you to trust my memory. That answer hurt because it was practical, almost brutally honest. Rowan turned away, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter until the dizziness passed. Gideon noticed immediately. He moved forward, then stopped several feet away. Rowan, are you feeling sick? Do not. Gideon froze. Do not suddenly become concerned because I look breakable. Something crossed Gideon's face. Pain. Maybe. I do not think you are breakable. His gaze dropped briefly toward Rowan's trembling hand. I think you have been standing for 10 minutes while your entire life rearranged itself, and you have not once blamed a 6-year-old child for what I did. Rowan swallowed. Gideon continued softly. That is one of the things I love about you. The word love landed badly and beautifully at the same time. Rowan looked at him. You do not get to use that word to make this smaller. I know. Gideon pulled out a kitchen chair, but did not touch Rowan. Sit because you choose to. Hate me from there if you need to. Against his better judgment, a broken little laugh escaped Rowan. Gideon's mouth almost moved into a smile, but he stopped himself. Rowan sat. Gideon poured water, set it within reach, then took the chair across from him instead of beside him. No alpha crowding. No demand for forgiveness. Just distance Rowan had not realized he needed until Gideon gave it to him. Rowan drank half the glass. His heartbeat finally slowed. It was the first kindness Gideon had offered tonight that did not feel like an attempt to erase what happened. Tomorrow, Gideon said, I will give you the address, custody documents, dates, and every absence I lied about. You can verify everything yourself. Rowan studied him. Why tomorrow? Gideon's eyes flicked toward the drawer where Rowan had hidden the gift. Because tonight there is something else you were trying to tell me. Rowan went completely still. Gideon did not reach for the drawer. He simply looked at Rowan, waiting. For once, the most powerful man Rowan knew was refusing to take control. Rowan rested a hand over his stomach beneath the table. He was not ready to forgive Gideon. He was not even ready to trust him. But for the first time since Milo appeared at the door, Rowan understood that the next truth belonged to him, and he could decide when Gideon deserved to hear it. Tomorrow, Rowan said. Bring everything. Gideon nodded. Everything. Rowan held his gaze. And after I see it, I decide whether you still have a place in my life. Gideon's face went pale, but he did not argue. Yes. That single answer changed. Something between them. Gideon was no longer the man controlling two separate worlds, and Rowan was no longer the man unknowingly living inside one of them. Tomorrow, Gideon would have to place both lives on the same table and let Rowan decide what remained. By 10 the next morning, Gideon had turned Rowan's kitchen table into evidence against himself. 2 years of calendars, custody records, school pickup receipts, travel schedules, and printed credit card statements sat in neat chronological stacks where the unopened baby gift had been the night before. Rowan stood over them with cold coffee in one hand and a yellow highlighter in the other. Gideon had arrived at 8 carrying no flowers, no apology gift, and no expectation that Rowan would make this easy. Smart man. March 14th, Rowan said. You told me Denver. Gideon looked at the calendar. Milo had pneumonia. I stayed at the townhouse. Rowan highlighted the date. Thanksgiving weekend. Milo's school break. Another yellow line. Last May. 3 nights. Gideon's voice dropped. His kindergarten graduation. Rowan stopped highlighting. That one hurt differently. He remembered Gideon returning with a tiny dinosaur sticker on his laptop case. Rowan had teased him about becoming sentimental. Gideon had smiled and said a client's daughter gave it to him. A lie so unnecessary it somehow hurt more than the large ones. There was never another partner? Rowan asked. No. That does not make this good. I know. Gideon did not defend himself once. By noon, Rowan had found something Gideon apparently had not noticed. He pulled 3 calendars closer together. Your stories changed whenever Milo's schedule changed. Gideon frowned. What? Rowan tapped the pages. You used client meetings when you knew dates in advance. Emergencies when custody changed unexpectedly. You were not lying randomly. You built a system. Gideon stared at the pattern. For the first time all morning, he looked genuinely shaken. Rowan almost resented how satisfying that was. I draw buildings for a living, Rowan said. I notice structures. Gideon's gaze shifted from the papers to Rowan. I know. Do you? Yes. His answer came too quickly to be polite. You see failures before other people see there is even a problem. I should have remembered that before trying to build a life around you with a wall down the middle. Rowan looked away before Gideon could see how deeply the words landed. The buzzer sounded downstairs. Gideon checked his watch. I have to stop at the office. The Henderson presentation was moved because of me. I can leave these here. Rowan considered the papers. I am coming. Gideon blinked. Why? Because these statements reference reimbursements through your firm, and I want copies from the source. Something almost like pride appeared in Gideon's expression. All right. 20 minutes later, Rowan understood again how different Gideon's world was from his own. Rourke Design Group occupied 3 polished floors of a glass tower downtown. People straightened when Gideon crossed the lobby. An assistant abandoned a conversation mid-sentence to meet him. A senior architect hurried over with a tablet. Gideon, the Henderson team is waiting. We can have your guest use the lounge. Guest. Rowan felt the word immediately reduce him to an accessory beside Gideon's tailored suit. He is not waiting anywhere, Gideon said. The architect hesitated. The client meeting is confidential. Rowan Keats is an architectural illustrator, and he is here with my authorization. Give him access to the reimbursement archive he requested. The man's eyes flicked toward Rowan's inexpensive coat, then back to Gideon. Of course. Gideon's expression cooled. And if you need a professional reason to treat him like one, look at the Westbridge adaptive reuse renderings your team praised last quarter. Those were his. The architect stared at Rowan. You did Westbridge? Rowan lifted an eyebrow. Apparently my coat disguised me. Gideon made a sound suspiciously close to a laugh. 10 minutes later, Rowan was reviewing digital expense files at a workstation while Gideon stood across the room being surrounded by executives asking questions faster than most people could answer them. Gideon handled each one with frightening efficiency, approving a budget revision, rejecting a materials substitution, and moving a deadline without raising his voice. Then Rowan noticed a floor plan glowing on the presentation screen. Wait. Nobody heard him except Gideon. Gideon immediately stopped speaking. What? Rowan pointed. That accessible entrance has a 48-inch turning clearance after the doors swing. Your plan labels 60. The room went quiet. One architect frowned. The software verified it. Rowan walked closer. The software measured before the hardware revision. The hinge changed. Gideon studied the drawing for 3 seconds. He is right. The senior architect checked, then visibly paled. He is right. Gideon did not take credit or soften the mistake for his staff. Correct it before the client sees it. Rowan caught what 12 of us missed. Every eye in the room shifted toward Rowan, and this time nobody looked at his coat. On the ride home, Gideon was unusually quiet. You are staring, Rowan finally said. I am thinking. Dangerous hobby. Gideon's mouth curved faintly. I spent 2 years believing I had to protect you from the complicated parts of my life. Rowan looked out the window. You mean hide them? Yes. Gideon accepted the correction. And today you walked into the most intimidating room in my company, found a problem my senior team missed, and asked for evidence against me without flinching. His voice softened. I underestimated you. I will regret that for a long time. Rowan's defenses shifted, only an inch, but enough to frighten him. Then Gideon's phone lit up on the console. He had turned it back on for work. A school notification filled the screen. Milo Rourke, early dismissal tomorrow. Authorized pickup, Gideon Rourke. Rowan stared at the name. No coded calendar entry. No fake client. Just the truth, visible where Rowan could see it. Gideon noticed his gaze. I am picking him up at 2:30. He paused. You never have to meet him again if you do not want to. Rowan thought of Milo apologizing for making his day weird, as if a 6-year-old had somehow caused any of this. That is not what I want. Gideon went still. Rowan looked at him. Trust was nowhere near repaired, but something had changed. Yesterday, Milo had been proof of betrayal. Today he was also an innocent child trapped inside Gideon's fear. I want to see the townhouse, Rowan said. Not paperwork. Not photographs. The life you kept separate from me. Gideon's hands tightened around the steering wheel. All of it. All of it. Gideon nodded slowly. Then tomorrow, I will take you there. Rowan rested his hand over his still secret pregnancy and watched the city slide past the window. For the first time, he was not asking Gideon to explain the second life. He was choosing to walk into it. The next afternoon, Rowan expected Gideon to take him straight to the townhouse. Instead, at 2:25, Gideon's black sedan stopped outside Milo's elementary school, where a line of parents stretched beneath a row of bare trees. Gideon loosened his tie before getting out. It was such a small thing that Rowan almost missed what it meant. The man who walked into boardrooms armored in perfect tailoring apparently did not want his son meeting that version of him. You can stay here, Gideon said. I know. Rowan opened his door. I am coming anyway. Gideon looked at him for one quiet second, then nodded. They had barely reached the entrance when a sharply dressed man carrying a leather portfolio stepped into their path. Rowan recognized him from Gideon's office, Malcolm Voss, one of the firm's senior partners. His polite smile faded when he noticed Rowan. Gideon, I thought you canceled the Henderson review for a family matter. His gaze moved between Rowan and the school. I did. I see. 2 words. Somehow they managed to sound like an accusation. Malcolm lowered his voice. People upstairs are already asking questions. Bringing personal complications into the office yesterday did not help. Rowan understood immediately. Personal complications meant him. The freelance Omega in the inexpensive coat who had appeared beside one of the most influential alphas in the firm and embarrassed the senior design team by finding their mistake. Rowan had spent years around wealthy clients. He knew how contempt worked when it wore good manners. I was there because I requested records connected to Gideon's absences, Rowan said evenly. Finding your accessibility error was free. Malcolm's expression tightened. Gideon almost smiled. Almost. Then Malcolm said, whatever arrangement the two of you have, the firm cannot afford instability around a partner with Gideon's profile. Gideon's face changed. Not dramatically. That was what made it worse. The warmth disappeared. Rowan is not instability. Malcolm glanced toward the school doors. That is not what I meant. It is exactly what you meant. Gideon's voice remained quiet. Parents passed around them without realizing that a man who regularly controlled projects worth tens of millions of dollars had just gone colder than the February air. Yesterday, Rowan prevented this firm from presenting a non-compliant entrance to a major client. Today he is here because I lied to him about where I spent part of the last 2 years. If you are looking for the source of instability, Malcolm, you are speaking to him. He touched his own chest. Rowan stared. Gideon could have protected his reputation with one vague sentence. Instead, he had placed the blame exactly where it belonged. Malcolm looked genuinely uncomfortable. This is hardly the place. Then you should not have brought it here. The school doors opened before Malcolm could answer. Children poured outside in bright coats and backpacks. Milo spotted Gideon and ran toward him, then slowed when he saw Rowan. His expression became uncertain. Rowan knew that look. The child was wondering whether yesterday had made him unwelcome. Gideon crouched beside Milo. Remember Rowan? Milo nodded. Did I get him in trouble? Gideon's eyes immediately found Rowan's. No, you told the truth. Adults are responsible for what happens after that. Something inside Rowan loosened. Gideon had just given his son the reassurance Rowan wished someone had given him yesterday. Milo looked relieved. Then he held up a construction paper model crushed slightly inside his backpack. We made houses. Gideon accepted it like someone had handed him an architectural award. This roof is structurally ambitious. Milo giggled. That means crooked. Extremely crooked. Rowan laughed before he could stop himself. Gideon looked at him, and for a second the entire hard line of his face softened. Malcolm was still standing nearby. Milo noticed him and proudly held up the model. Mr. Malcolm, Rowan draws buildings too. Malcolm gave Rowan a strained smile. So I have heard. Gideon corrected him without looking away from Rowan. Rowan does not just draw buildings. He understands them. The recognition hit harder than Rowan expected. Gideon was not rescuing him. He was naming something Rowan had earned long before Gideon ever loved him. Malcolm excused himself shortly afterward, but the damage had already changed shape. On the drive across town, Gideon's phone filled with messages from the firm. He ignored every one. You should answer those, Rowan said. Eventually, your partners are angry. They are allowed to be. You cannot burn down your career every time somebody insults me. Gideon glanced at him. I did not defend you because you were insulted. I corrected a lie. Rowan looked toward the back seat, where Milo was explaining to his crooked paper house why it needed stronger tape. You really are terrifying at work. So I have been told. Milo has you making paper houses. Gideon's mouth curved. Milo outranks the board. Rowan laughed again, and this time Gideon did too. It was painfully ordinary. For 5 minutes, Rowan forgot he was supposed to be guarding his heart. Then they turned onto a quiet residential street. Gideon's smile vanished. The sedan stopped before a modest brick townhouse with a blue front door. Milo jumped out and ran up the steps. Gideon remained beside Rowan on the sidewalk. Once you walk inside, there will be things you recognize, he said. Things I explained away. Things I should have shown you. Rowan felt the old hurt return, but it no longer felt like something he had to carry alone. Gideon held out a key, placing it in Rowan's palm instead of opening the door himself. You decide when we go in. Rowan looked at the key, then at Gideon. Yesterday, Gideon had controlled every locked door between them. Today, he was handing Rowan one. Rowan climbed the steps. Milo was already waiting impatiently beneath the porch light. Come on. I want to show you my room. Rowan put the key into the lock. Gideon stayed one step behind him. The door opened, and Rowan's breath caught. On the entry table sat a framed photograph he recognized immediately. It was a picture of Rowan himself, laughing over a stack of architectural drawings taken nearly a year ago. Gideon had kept Rowan hidden from this life. But somehow, impossibly, he had not kept Rowan out of it. The photograph on the entry table should have comforted Rowan. Instead, it made the townhouse feel stranger. Gideon had hidden Milo from Rowan, yet Rowan's face had apparently been sitting beside Milo's front door for almost a year. Papa has more, Milo announced, already halfway down the hall. Gideon closed his eyes briefly. Milo. What? Milo turned around. You do. Rowan looked at Gideon. More what? Gideon did not answer quickly enough. Milo solved the problem by running into the living room and pointing toward a bookshelf. Between children's books and framed school pictures sat a small collection of photographs Rowan recognized. Rowan asleep over a drafting table. Rowan laughing in a coffee shop. Rowan standing beneath an umbrella during their trip to Seattle. Nothing secretive or invasive. They were photographs Gideon had taken during their life together. He tells me about you, Milo said. Rowan went still. He does. You draw buildings. You hate raisins. You make pancakes shaped like animals, but Papa said your bear looked like a potato. Rowan slowly turned toward Gideon. You told him about my pancakes? Gideon looked almost embarrassed. They were memorable. They were bears. Of course. Milo disappeared upstairs to find something else, leaving them alone. Rowan walked farther into the townhouse. Evidence was everywhere now that he knew how to read it. The dinosaur sticker from Milo's graduation appeared on a framed certificate. A blue ceramic mug Rowan remembered Gideon bringing home after a supposed conference sat beside the coffee machine. On the refrigerator was a school calendar with several dates matching the yellow lines Rowan had highlighted that morning. 2 years of lies had physical addresses. Yet something else did not fit. There were no photographs of another partner. No second adult coat by the door. No romantic traces. Just Gideon and Milo, over and over, building an ordinary life in rooms Rowan had never been allowed to enter. Where is Milo's other father? Rowan asked. Gideon's shoulders tightened. Not living some secret life with me, if that is what you are asking. I am asking because I am tired of discovering answers from furniture. Gideon absorbed that without protest. His name is Caleb. We were together briefly before Milo was born. We were never married. After Milo's first year, Caleb decided he did not want the responsibility of parenting. He signed a custody agreement. He has limited contact now. Rowan stared at him. So there was never another relationship here. No. Relief came first, sharp and humiliating. Then anger followed because relief did not erase anything. You let me believe there might have been. I know. You watched me question 2 years of my life when you could have said that last night. Gideon's face tightened. You asked for facts. I was trying not to control which facts made you feel better. That sounds very noble for a man who controlled the truth for 2 years. Gideon looked away. That was when Milo returned carrying a thick folder covered in rocket ship stickers. Look, Rowan. He opened it on the coffee table. Inside were drawings. Milo with Gideon. Milo at school. A crooked blue house. Then Rowan saw himself. In one picture, 3 stick figures stood beneath an enormous yellow sun. One was labeled me. One Papa. The third, taller figure wore green and held what looked like a pencil. Rowan. His chest tightened. Why am I in this? Milo shrugged as if the answer were obvious. Because Papa said maybe someday you could meet me. Rowan looked at Gideon. Everything inside him went quiet. Someday. Gideon said nothing. You planned for us to meet? Yes. When? Gideon's silence answered before his mouth did. Rowan stood. There was never a plan. There was always a plan. I just kept moving it. Why? Gideon finally looked at him, and the powerful alpha Rowan had watched command an entire office seemed suddenly stripped of every defense. Because 6 months after we started dating, you told me you were terrified of waking up one day responsible for a family you had not chosen. Rowan remembered. A late-night conversation after friends announced an unexpected pregnancy. Rowan had talked about growing up with parents who treated obligation like love. He had said he never wanted that. I was talking about choice, Rowan whispered. I know that now. Gideon's voice broke slightly. At the time, all I heard was that if I told you about Milo, I might lose you. Rowan stared at him. So you took the choice away from me. Gideon had no answer. That was the midpoint of everything. Rowan had entered the townhouse prepared to discover that Gideon loved somebody else. The truth was somehow more intimate and more painful. Gideon had loved Rowan. He had loved Milo. He had even imagined them becoming a family. And because he feared losing either one, he had built walls between them and called those walls protection. You showed him pictures of me, Rowan said. You let him know me before I knew he existed. Yes. You let me fall more deeply in love with you every month while deciding I was too fragile to know your son existed. Gideon's eyes closed. Yes. Rowan pressed a hand against his stomach. The movement caught Gideon's attention. This time Rowan saw him notice it. Really notice it. Gideon's gaze dropped to Rowan's hand, then lifted slowly to his face. Rowan. There was no point hiding it anymore. Rowan had wanted this truth to arrive inside a silver box. Instead, it came between a child's drawings and the wreckage of another secret. I am pregnant. Gideon stopped breathing. Rowan continued before hope could appear on his face. I found out yesterday morning. The box on the table was for you. Gideon's expression crumpled in a way Rowan had never seen. I was going to surprise you, Rowan said. And then your son knocked on our door. Gideon took one instinctive step forward. Rowan stepped back. Gideon stopped immediately. That small obedience hurt almost as much as everything else. I need to leave, Rowan said. Please let me drive you. No. Then let me call a car. Gideon. Rowan's voice softened, not because he had forgiven him, but because he finally understood the frightened man behind the lies. You cannot fix this by taking care of me. Gideon went still. Rowan picked up his coat. From the stairs, Milo called his name, and Rowan looked back long enough to promise the boy that none of this was his fault. Then Rowan faced Gideon one last time. You were so afraid I would leave if you told me the truth that you never gave me the chance to stay. Gideon looked devastated because there was nothing to argue with. Rowan opened the blue front door. For the first time since they had met, Gideon did not follow him. And for the first time since learning about Milo, Rowan understood the real question was no longer whether Gideon had another life. It was whether a man who had spent years dividing love into separate rooms could ever learn to live honestly enough to deserve one family. Rowan spent the next 3 days in his studio apartment above the print shop, where the radiator clicked too loudly and the kitchen table had been surrendered to architectural drawings years ago. Gideon did not come. That mattered more than Rowan wanted it to. He sent one message each morning with practical information. Milo was safe. The custody records were available. Rowan's prenatal insurance paperwork had arrived at their apartment. No demands. No questions about when Rowan was coming home. On the 4th evening, rain turned the windows silver while Rowan fought through nausea and a deadline for a hotel renovation in Portland. Someone knocked. Rowan opened the door expecting his downstairs neighbor and found Gideon standing beneath the hallway light, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat. He held Rowan's drafting case in one hand and a grocery bag in the other. You left your precision pens, Gideon said. Rowan looked at the bag. And apparently a supermarket. Crackers, ginger tea, apples, the soup you tolerate when you are sick. Rowan's defenses rose automatically. I told you that taking care of me does not fix this. I remember. Gideon set both bags beside the door instead of entering. That is why I am leaving them here. He turned to go. Rowan hated the small twist in his chest. Gideon. Gideon stopped. Did you eat? The question surprised both of them. Gideon glanced toward the stairwell. Not yet. Rowan sighed. The soup is too much for one person. 10 minutes later, they sat on opposite sides of Rowan's crowded table, eating from mismatched bowls while rain tapped against the glass. Gideon looked absurdly out of place among tracing paper, chipped mugs, and a chair Rowan had repaired with wood glue. Somehow he also looked more tired than Rowan had ever seen him. Why did you become like this? Rowan asked. Gideon looked up. That is an alarmingly broad question. The hiding. The controlling. Deciding what everybody can handle. Gideon's spoon went still. For several seconds, Rowan thought he would retreat behind the polished silence everyone at his firm seemed afraid of. Instead, Gideon said, My father left when I was 12. Rowan waited. Not dramatically. No final argument. He simply decided another life suited him better. My mother spent years pretending it did not matter. I became very good at being useful because useful people seemed harder to abandon. Gideon gave a humorless smile. Good grades. Good schools. Good firm. Good alpha. Everything controlled. And then Milo. Nothing about Milo could be controlled. Gideon's expression softened. He was loud and terrified and needed me at 3 in the morning. Caleb leaving confirmed the worst thing I already believed. People stay until responsibility becomes inconvenient. Rowan understood before Gideon finished. Then you met me. Gideon nodded. And I wanted you enough to become exactly the kind of man I hated. Rowan's throat tightened. Gideon did not ask for sympathy. That made the confession harder to dismiss. Understanding why you lied does not make the lying acceptable. It should not. I still do not trust you. I know. Gideon's voice remained steady, but his eyes did not. Rowan noticed that too. For years, Gideon had protected himself by making sure nobody saw him afraid. Now he was sitting in a cramped apartment admitting that fear without knowing whether Rowan would stay. Rowan pushed the remaining crackers toward him. Eat. Gideon obeyed. It was ridiculous. It was also the closest they had felt in days. Rowan returned to his drawings afterward while Gideon quietly washed both bowls. He did not rearrange the kitchen. He did not criticize the leaking faucet. He simply noticed what needed doing and did it. When Rowan's nausea returned, Gideon placed a glass of water beside his elbow without touching him. When Rowan became tired, Gideon packed the precision pins back into their case. Small things. No speeches. No promises large enough to hide behind. You can stop hovering, Rowan murmured. I am 12 feet away. Emotionally, you hover. Gideon almost laughed. Rowan did too. Then his laptop chimed. A revised floor plan from Gideon's firm had arrived for the Henderson project. Rowan frowned. Why am I copied on this? Gideon dried his hands. Because you found the accessibility problem. Your team can handle it now. They can. I asked them to include you anyway. Rowan looked at him. Why? Gideon's answer was simple. Because your work deserves credit even if you never forgive me. Something inside Rowan shifted. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But trust returned in the smallest possible unit. Gideon reached for his coat. I will go. Thunder rolled outside. Rowan looked at the rain, then at the man who had respected every boundary for 4 days. The couch folds out. Gideon froze. Rowan, it is raining hard, and you look exhausted. This is not reconciliation. Understood. You sleep on the couch. Obviously. And tomorrow morning, you leave before I convince myself this was a terrible idea. Gideon's expression softened with something dangerously close to hope. Whatever you need. That night Rowan woke around 2 and found the apartment quiet. Gideon was asleep on the narrow couch, one arm hanging toward the floor, his expensive coat folded beneath his head because he had refused to take Rowan's only spare pillow. Rowan stood there longer than necessary. The most powerful man he knew looked strangely ordinary in sleep. Human. Alone. Rowan quietly placed the spare blanket over him. Gideon stirred but did not wake. Rowan's hand moved instinctively to his stomach. He still did not know whether Gideon could become the man their child deserved. But for the first time since walking out of the townhouse, Rowan wanted to find out. Then Gideon's phone illuminated on the coffee table. A message preview from Malcolm appeared across the screen. Emergency partner meeting tomorrow. The board is questioning your judgment regarding Rowan Keats. Rowan woke before Gideon and wished he had not seen Malcolm's message. The words sat in his mind through breakfast like a warning label. The board is questioning your judgment regarding Rowan Keats. Gideon left at 7:30 after folding the blanket with ridiculous precision. He did not mention the meeting. Rowan almost asked. He stopped himself. Trust could not mean demanding access to every conversation Gideon had. By 10, Rowan was at Rourke Design Group because the Henderson team had requested his corrected accessibility sketches for the client review. He told himself that was the only reason his stomach tightened when the elevator opened onto the executive floor. The conference room was already crowded. Senior architects, legal counsel, 3 board members, and Malcolm Voss stood around the long glass table. Gideon was at the far end in a navy suit, unreadable again. For one terrible second, Rowan wondered whether the man who had slept on his broken couch had disappeared the moment he stepped back into power. Malcolm noticed Rowan first. Perfect timing. Gideon's gaze snapped toward him. Malcolm, one word. Warning, not greeting. Malcolm ignored it and touched the screen behind him. A series of expense records appeared. Gideon's reimbursements. Rowan recognized several from the documents he had reviewed. Then came photographs. Rowan entering Gideon's building. Rowan leaving the townhouse. Rowan riding in Gideon's car. None were scandalous. Together, stripped of context, they told an uglier story. Malcolm addressed the room. We have a freelancer romantically involved with a senior partner, receiving access to internal project materials immediately before being credited with identifying a costly design error. Rowan felt every face turn toward him. That is not what happened. Malcolm clicked again. An email appeared. Gideon had written it months earlier to accounting. Make sure Rowan's invoice is prioritized. He should not have to chase us for payment. Malcolm let the silence do the work. Preferential treatment predates yesterday. Rowan remembered that invoice. He had waited 47 days for payment while trying to cover rent. He had complained to Gideon over dinner. Gideon had apparently fixed it without telling him. At the time it would have felt like care. Here it looked like influence. You are implying I fabricated the accessibility issue, Rowan said. I am asking whether an independent contractor with a personal relationship to Gideon should have been inside a confidential presentation at all. He found the error before he was added to the project, Gideon said. Malcolm turned toward him. And your immediate defense is exactly the problem. Rowan looked at Gideon. This was the moment he had feared without admitting it. Gideon could destroy Malcolm's argument with status alone, but doing so would only prove Malcolm's point. One board member cleared his throat. Mr. Keats, were you aware Mr. Rourke had intervened in your payments? No. Were you aware he requested your inclusion on Henderson? Rowan swallowed. Not until yesterday. Malcolm nodded as if Rowan had helped him. So even Mr. Keats does not know how much of his professional access came through Gideon. Heat rose behind Rowan's eyes. He had spent 10 years building a career one brutal deadline at a time. He had worked from folding tables, coffee shops, borrowed studios. He had never needed Gideon to make him talented. Yet suddenly every achievement in this room had become suspicious because the man he loved had quietly helped him. Rowan looked at Gideon. Did you ever recommend me for work without telling me? Gideon's silence lasted 1 second too long. Rowan's chest tightened. Gideon. Yes. The answer barely carried across the room. Rowan felt something drop inside him. Another choice made for him. Another piece of his life arranged behind his back. How many times? Gideon's jaw tightened. I need the project records before I answer that. Malcolm almost smiled. Convenient. Gideon turned on him with such cold fury that Malcolm's smile disappeared, but Gideon still did not defend himself. Instead, he looked toward legal counsel. Pull every referral, invoice authorization, project assignment, and internal communication involving Rowan Keats. Full history. No omissions. Rowan stared at him. Now. Especially now. Gideon's voice softened only when he looked at Rowan. I will not guess and accidentally lie to you again. It was rational. Responsible. It still felt unbearable. Rowan had finally begun believing Gideon could stop managing his life from the shadows, only to discover Gideon's protection had reached into his career too. A board member asked Rowan to leave while they reviewed the conflict. Gideon immediately said, no. Rowan shook his head. It is fine. Rowan. No, Gideon. You wanted the complete record. So do I. Rowan gathered his portfolio. Nobody stopped him. That hurt more than he expected. At the elevator, Gideon followed far enough to catch the door before it closed, but he did not step inside. Behind him, Malcolm and the board waited. In front of him stood Rowan, exhausted, pregnant, and suddenly uncertain which parts of his own success belonged entirely to him. "I did not buy your career," Gideon said quietly. Rowan looked at him. "But you touched it without telling me." Gideon had no defense. "Yes." The elevator chimed. Rowan stepped inside. Gideon's hand remained against the door. For one moment, Rowan wanted him to abandon the board. Come with him. Choose him immediately and visibly. Then Gideon lowered his hand. "I need 20 minutes, he said. "For what?" "To make sure that when I speak, nobody in that room can ever question what you earned." The doors began closing. Rowan could not tell whether Gideon's silence was finally the honesty he had asked for, or simply another moment when Gideon had chosen something else first. As the gap narrowed, Rowan saw him turn back toward the conference room. Then the doors shut, leaving Rowan alone with the worst question Gideon's lies had created. If even his own work had been quietly shaped by Gideon's hand, what part of the life Rowan was fighting to protect was truly his? Rowan had made it halfway across the lobby when his phone rang. Gideon. He almost ignored it. Almost. "What?" "Come back upstairs." Gideon's voice was calm, but there was something underneath it Rowan had never heard before. Not control. Certainty. "Why?" "Because Malcolm questioned your work in public. The correction should happen in public too." Rowan closed his eyes. "Gideon, I do not need you to rescue me." "I know." A pause. "That is why I found the evidence instead." 15 minutes later, Rowan walked back into the conference room with his portfolio under one arm and every instinct telling him to leave. Nobody was talking. Gideon stood beside the presentation screen. For folders lay on the glass table. Malcolm sat rigidly near the board members. Gideon did not offer Rowan the chair beside him. He placed an empty chair at the table with everyone else, treating Rowan exactly as what Malcolm had tried to deny he was, a professional with the right to be present. "We have completed the audit," Gideon said. "Start with Henderson." Legal counsel displayed the project history. The original floor plan appeared beside Rowan's marked correction. Timestamps showed Rowan had identified the accessibility problem before he received system access, before his name was added to the project, and before Gideon requested that he be credited. Then came an older file, the Westbridge renderings. Rowan's contract carried a date from 11 months earlier. Beside it was an internal review written by Malcolm himself. Rowan Keats demonstrates exceptional spatial interpretation and should be considered for future adaptive reuse work. Malcolm went pale. Rowan stared at the screen. Gideon continued. "You praised his work before you knew we were together." Another document appeared. "You approved his vendor status." Another. "You recommended renewing him." Gideon looked directly at Malcolm. "And yesterday, after Rowan identified an error your team missed, you requested that his access be revoked on the basis of a personal conflict you already knew existed when you approved his previous work." Malcolm leaned forward. "The issue is preferential treatment." "Then, we should discuss mine." Gideon opened the second folder. "I accelerated one overdue invoice after Rowan told me he had been waiting 47 days. Accounting records show the invoice was already approved and should have been paid 31 days earlier. I did not increase his fee. I made the firm pay money it already owed him." Rowan released a breath he had not realized he was holding. "I also recommended Rowan for 3 projects without telling him." Gideon looked at Rowan now. "That was wrong. Not because he was unqualified. Because I interfered with something that belonged to him without giving him a choice." Malcolm seized on it. "There. You admit it." "Completely." Gideon turned toward the board. "So remove me from every decision involving Rowan Keats." Effective immediately, the room went silent. Rowan's heart stopped. Gideon continued before anyone could interrupt. "Independent review can determine his future assignments. If the board believes my personal conduct created a conflict, I will recuse myself from Henderson and accept whatever internal review is appropriate." Malcolm stared. "You would step away from Henderson for a freelancer?" Gideon's expression became very still. "No. I would step away because my position should never be used as an excuse to erase work someone else earned." Then he crossed to the presentation table, removed his own name card from the head position, and placed Rowan's corrected accessibility drawing in the center instead. This is the drawing that saved us from presenting a flawed plan to the client. Rowan found the error. Rowan explained the error. Rowan deserves the credit. No romantic declaration could have reached Rowan the way that action did. Gideon was not asking the room to respect Rowan because he loved him. He was demanding that they recognize Rowan because Rowan had earned it. One board member turned toward Malcolm. Why were the photographs necessary? Malcolm hesitated. Legal counsel answered instead. They were obtained by a private investigator retained through a discretionary consulting account. The room changed. Gideon's eyes hardened. You had Rowan followed? Malcolm's confidence cracked. I was documenting the conflict. You were constructing a narrative, Gideon said. Legal counsel displayed the expense authorization. Malcolm had approved it himself 2 days after Rowan corrected the Henderson plan. The timing was devastating. He had not begun investigating because of an established ethics concern. He had begun after Rowan embarrassed his team. The board chair closed the folder. Mr. Voss, you will surrender project authority pending an ethics review. Effective today. Malcolm looked around for support and found none. The evidence he had collected to discredit Rowan had exposed his own motive. Rowan expected satisfaction. What he felt instead was relief. Clean, quiet relief. His work was still his. His life was still his. Gideon approached, but stopped several feet away. Always the distance Rowan had asked for. There is one more thing, Gideon said. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Gideon turned to the room. Rowan is my partner. I concealed important parts of my life from him because I was afraid of losing him. That failure belongs to me. His pregnancy, his relationship with me, and my mistakes do not reduce his professional value. Rowan's breath caught. Gideon had said it. Pregnancy. Partner. No hidden room. No carefully managed version of the truth. Everything visible. Gideon's career might pay for that honesty, and he had chosen it anyway. Rowan walked toward the table and picked up his drawing. I want the independent review. Gideon nodded immediately. You should have it. And if I work with this firm again, nobody calls you before hiring me. Agreed. Rowan looked around the room. Then I think we are finished. He walked out under his own power. Gideon did not follow until the meeting formally ended. In the elevator lobby, Rowan heard footsteps and turned. Gideon stopped beside him. I am sorry it took me this long to understand the difference between protecting you and respecting you. Rowan studied the man who had once hidden an entire child because he feared the consequences of truth. Today, Gideon had placed his reputation, authority, mistakes, and love on one table and let everyone see them. Rowan reached out and took his hand. Gideon went. Completely still. This does not mean everything is fixed, Rowan said. I know. Rowan squeezed his fingers. But I do not want to walk home alone today. Gideon's eyes softened. He did not pull Rowan closer. He simply held on. Then you will not. For the first time, being chosen by Gideon did not feel like being managed. It felt like standing beside him. And as the elevator doors opened, Rowan realized there was only one question left between them now, whether they could turn that choice into a family. 3 months later, Rowan stood in the same kitchen where a tiny silver gift box had once waited beside a dinner that nobody ate. The apartment looked different now. Not renovated. Lived in. Milo's crooked blue house was taped to the refrigerator beside Rowan's latest architectural sketches. A row of prenatal vitamins occupied the counter where Gideon used to keep perfectly aligned coffee canisters. Near the window sat an unfinished crib that Gideon had spent 2 evenings assembling before finally admitting he had installed one rail backward. Rowan had laughed until his stomach hurt. More importantly, Gideon had changed in ways nobody could photograph. There were no unexplained nights anymore. When Milo stayed at the townhouse, Rowan knew. When a client meeting ran late, Gideon called before Rowan had to wonder. When plans changed, Gideon told them why. The townhouse remained Milo's home during his regular schedule because Rowan had refused to let Gideon's guilt take something stable away from his son. The difference was that the blue door was no longer an entrance to another life. Rowan had a key. Milo had a drawer in the apartment. Their calendars existed in one place. Gideon had stopped treating love like separate rooms that could never touch. Rowan had changed too. The independent review at Rourke Design Group had confirmed his work on Henderson without Gideon's involvement, and Rowan had accepted a consulting contract under one condition. Gideon would have no authority over his assignments or compensation. Gideon had signed the conflict disclosure before Rowan finished explaining it. That mattered. So did the fact that Rowan had kept his studio. He knew. Longer wanted security that depended on never being able to leave. He wanted a life he chose every morning. Tonight, he had chosen Gideon. Why does it smell suspiciously good in here? Gideon called from the hallway. Rowan smiled and adjusted the small box on the table. Because I ordered dinner. Gideon entered carrying Milo's backpack in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. Milo rushed past him toward the refrigerator. Rowan, look. I got a star on my spelling test. An actual star? Rowan examined the paper with exaggerated seriousness. This family is getting dangerously accomplished. Gideon stopped when he saw the table. The same food. The same candles. The same silver box. His expression changed immediately. Rowan, sit down. Gideon obeyed. Months ago, Rowan would have mistaken the tension in Gideon's shoulders for control. Now he recognized fear. Gideon still carried it. He had simply stopped letting fear make decisions for everyone else. Rowan placed the box in front of him. This was supposed to be yours that night. Gideon touched the ribbon but did not open it. Are you sure? Rowan understood the question beneath the question. Are you sure about me? About us? About this family? Yes, Rowan said. Now I am. Gideon opened the box. Inside were the tiny cream-colored baby socks Rowan had bought after his first appointment. Beneath them was the original card. Gideon's eyes filled before he finished reading it. Then he noticed something new underneath. A photograph. Milo stood in the middle, grinning proudly, Gideon on one side and Rowan on the other, Rowan's pregnancy clearly visible beneath his sweater. Milo had drawn a fourth little figure at the bottom in blue marker. Coming soon, he had written beneath it. Gideon laughed once, quietly, and covered his mouth. Rowan had seen him negotiate with furious developers, face a hostile board, and publicly accept consequences that could have damaged the career he had spent half his life building. Somehow a pair of baby socks defeated him completely. I missed this the first time, Gideon said. You did. Because of me. Yes. Rowan did not soften the truth anymore. He did not need to. Gideon nodded. I cannot give that night back to you. No. Rowan reached across the table. But you gave me something I needed more. Gideon looked up. The ability to choose you knowing who you actually are. Gideon took Rowan's hand carefully. I love you. Rowan smiled. I know. Gideon raised an eyebrow. That was devastatingly unromantic. I am building suspense. Milo groaned from the refrigerator. Just say it back. Rowan laughed. Fine. I love you too. Gideon's smile appeared slowly, the rare one Rowan had once believed he needed to earn. Now Rowan understood love was not something either of them should have to earn through obedience, silence, or fear. It was something they kept choosing honestly. Gideon's hand moved toward Rowan's stomach, then stopped as it always did now, waiting. Rowan guided it the rest of the way. The baby moved beneath his palm. Gideon's entire face softened. The doorbell rang. All three of them froze. For one ridiculous second, Rowan was back at that first evening, holding a photograph while his imagined future collapsed around him. Gideon looked at him, concern flashing across his face. Then Milo shouted, "The crib mattress," and sprinted toward the door. Rowan started laughing. Gideon did too, relief breaking through both of them. "I will get it," Gideon said. Rowan caught his hand. "We will." They walked to the door together. Gideon did not step ahead of him. Rowan did not stand behind. Milo waited impatiently between them. Rowan opened the door without fear. Months ago, someone standing there with the truth had destroyed the life Rowan thought he had. Now there were no hidden children, no secret addresses, no carefully divided worlds waiting on the other side. There was simply Gideon's hand in his, Milo laughing beside them, and a baby coming into a family built not from perfect choices, but from honest ones. Rowan had once believed being chosen was the safest kind of love. Now he knew something better. He could see the whole truth, know his own worth, and choose for himself.